Yo. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
What's up, headliners? Justin Freeman here again from RunTheSims.com, and today we're going to be diving deep again behind the walls of DFS, trying to teach you a little bit more about how to become a more well-rounded DFS player. Of course, we're talking about DraftKings, FanDuel, Yahoo, wherever it is you're playing. We've got some really great tools up over at RunTheSims.com, so be sure you go check those out. You can use code HEADLINERS and also get you a pretty sweet little deal when you head over there at checkout. But today we're going to be talking about how to use some of the variety of tools that you'll find out there, whether you're using a site like Run the Sims or some of the other competing sites out there. No matter what you're choosing, you've probably heard of the term optimizers, right? Optimizer is a DFS tool that's basically designed to cram as many projected fantasy points into a lineup as possible. Now, if we just ask for an optimizer to say, hey, give me the 9-player lineup that fits under the salary cap with as many points in it as possible, well, what we've basically done is described a cash game lineup. Because in a cash game, we simply want to play the highest projected players. It's really not that much more difficult than that. The really good cash players out there in DFS are just able to do that better and better than the competition, because the competition in cash games, and again, remember cash games, we're talking about 50-50s, head-to-heads, double-ups, that sort of thing, where essentially half the field is going to get paid out. In those types of contests, the really sharp players playing cash games are basically saying, hey, I'm going to play the best possible lineup that the projections say I should play, and I'm going to leave it up to you, the opponent, to make the mistake. And quite often, people make mistakes. So essentially, that's how you could kind of use an optimizer for cash games. Is basically say, I'm not going to make any changes. Tell me which lineup projects for the most possible points. Now, using optimizers for tournaments, however, is a little bit more nuanced and takes a bit more skill, which is why I think you'll even see the sharper players have sort of abandoned cash and gone towards more tournament GPP style formats. So today we're going to look behind the Run the Sims optimizer. So let me get that pulled up here for you now, where basically you'll see right here that we've got selected the DraftKings main slate for the opening weekend of the season. Now, there's a lot of things currently changing with the way this is playing out, and I certainly wouldn't advise you to be making lineups almost 2 weeks ahead of time for your DFS contest, but hopefully we'll be able to go in and make some lineups that make sense for how we'd want to construct things for tournaments. So, kind of throw the players out the window for now, but let's think more so long term. And when we get back together next week, we'll talk a little bit more strategically about the plays of the week, because we're getting doggone close to football season, fellas. So let's look at this here. You obviously see that there's a player pool down here. So by selecting the slate here, which we've got the DraftKings main slate, you see the word main there, which is the tournament that the DraftKings Millie Maker is going to be a part of, right? It's going to be the 13-game main slate. These are the players we get to choose from. And obviously this list is a mile long. Going through each and every one of these players can be pretty daunting. So having a projection source and an optimizer, you can see pretty much right off the bat, is going to be a pretty attractive thing. So over here in this right-hand column called PROJ, short for projected, you're going to see the projected points for each and every one of those players. Now, obviously a lot is changing and evolving on these rosters, and so the projections are going to be changing over this next period of time as well. So we've got that information available to us. Now, how do we get this thing to build us really cool lineups? Well, the idea first is to get an understanding of the settings. So if we click on settings here, you'll see that we can basically get the optimizer to build us whatever types of lineups it is that we want. We can tell it the number of lineups we want, as few as 1 lineup, as many as 300 lineups. So depends on how many lineups you want to enter into a contest. Let's just say maybe we want 20 lineups, right? So we could go right here, click on 20 lineups, and we'll get exactly 20 lineups from the optimizer. Next is unique per lineup. So this is one that a lot of people skip past, but let me just sort of incentivize you to try to get as much uniqueness in your lineup as possible, because what this essentially says is how similar do you want those 20 lineups to look to one another? And if you're trying to like cover as many bases as possible, which is kind of a main reason that you'd want to play more than one lineup in the first place, I would encourage you to get at least 3 unique players in each lineup. What that means is like no more than 6 of your 9 players will match from one lineup to the next. So if you only have like 1 unique player per lineup, that's not exactly great because you just get like the same players over and over and over again. So let's go with 3 uniques here in this exact example. Next, we have the ability to determine how much exposure do we want to any one particular player in our player pool. Like, let's just say Travis Kelce is a fantastic play this week, but still we want exposure to some other tight ends. Well, what we could say here is like we don't want any more than 40% of Travis Kelce. So that 40% number says no more than 40% of any player. I don't care how good they are. Max them out at 40% of my lineups. And so if we're doing 20 lineups, and the max exposure is at 40%, well, 20 times 40% is 5 lineups. So we get no more than 5 lineups with any one player in it. Next, we get to choose how many is the max players per team. So we basically want to be able to set this low if we want to essentially not have a ton of overlap. Like, we wouldn't necessarily want Ezekiel Elliott and CeeDee Lamb together on the same team because they both play for the Cowboys, and if one of them does super well, the odds are, the other one probably didn't have a ceiling game, right? So we may say no more than 1 player from the same team. And then lastly here, salary range. You can actually adjust, like, do you want to make sure that all your lineups spend at least, say $49,000 or something like that. You could determine that right there. And then in this area here, you can modify your flex exposures as well. So you can see this is getting kind of in depth already. So just playing around with the settings, there's already so much you can do with an optimizer. And as you think through and we've sort of talked about this already with how to approach tournaments, you want to make sure that you accomplish certain objectives when you're making a lineup. It's not just good enough to throw 9 very good players in a lineup together. We want to insert correlation. We want our lineups to sort of make sense and tell a story. We want our lineups to not have too much ownership. So we're thinking about a lot of those things as we're making our lineup. So let's go back here to the player pool. So we've got our settings kind of geared up here. And you'll see that our max player exposure is 40% all the way down the board here. Our minimum is 0%. Now we can change this to make sure that we're getting at least certain amounts of different players. Like if we want to make sure we're getting at least 20% of Josh Allen in our lineups, I could simply just modify his minimum exposure to 20%. And so his max is still currently at 40. So now I know I'll be getting some number between 20 and 40% exposure on Josh Allen across my 20 lineups. And I could do that for any player up here that I want. And then another key feature when we're talking about optimizers is the ability to stack. Now, stacking obviously is when we're pairing players with a quarterback, and then often sometimes we'll be bringing back another player from the opposing team. So let's just say that we thought it was a really juicy game this week between, let me find something that's got a pretty high over under. There we go. Cleveland, Kansas City. It's got a 53-point total. The Chiefs are favored by 6.5. So let's say we wanted to click in here and we wanted to make sure that we were stacking this Kansas City side of the football because this game could really shoot out. And we want to make sure that we pair Patrick Mahomes with 2 pass catchers from that team, and then also bring it back with at least 1 player from Cleveland too, because we think that game could be a shootout. So I've got that keyed in exactly that way. 1 quarterback with 2 wide receiver tight ends. So I call that pass catchers. If I wanted to include running backs, I would do that right there, but I don't necessarily want to pair Patrick Mahomes with a running back. And we want to bring it back with any player from Cleveland, right? So I'll click Find Stacks here, and then instantly it's going to find the stacks sorted by the most fantasy points. Now, obviously, you can see it's pretty expensive. The number 1 option here, as predicted, was Patrick Mahomes with Kelce, Hill, and Nick Chubb. Now, of course, that's a fantastic lineup. However, it's going to cost you $31,800 of your $50,000 lineup just for those 4 players. So maybe we do want a little bit of that. So maybe let's just say we want roughly 20% of that stack. So we'd go ahead and plug that in right there. And we could do this over and over and over again for a variety of different quarterbacks. or different teams and different settings. In fact, I could add different stacks here, like maybe I want a little bit of the Mahomes, Kelsey, Hardman plus Chubb on the way back. We could have that in there as well. But let's just leave it as is for now. We got 20% of this one stack. We'll click generate lineups. And so this is basically telling the machine, go get us the 20 lineups that match what exactly we're looking for. And you can see that here in our player exposure list, we're getting an example of how often different players are popping off in our lineup. So look at the players that are popping off in 40%. Patrick Mahomes, Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, George Kittle, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, Michael Pittman, Marquez Callaway, Devonta Smith, Jamar Chase. All guys who are going to project out really well, especially points per dollar in our lineups. And then here you're seeing the actual lineups that we have the ability to play. Now, how do you get these lineups into the DraftKings player pool, basically into your lineups? Well, all you do is go right here and click download lineups. That'll bring up a CSV that you can download. You'll see mine right here in the bottom corner. Once you pull that up, it's a simple copy paste over into DraftKings with their lineup editing software. So that gives you just a little bit of a taste of how you can use optimizers, and ours is one of many out there on the market. I happen to think obviously ours is pretty dang good, and ours is built on simulations, whereas not many others out there are. Simulation basically saying, let's go in and pretend these games happened over and over and over again and find out what the true average looks like in those games. Like basically thinking we're running a Madden simulation over and over on the 13 games of that slate and taking those box scores and assigning them to the players, which I think is a really cool approach, and I think it's kind of the next big thing coming in DFS. So if you're interested in learning more about DFS and using some of the tools such as our optimizer here, you can do that over at runthesims.com/headliners. That way you'll be able to find out more about the promotional details we've got going on for the special people here as part of the Headliners community. Again, I'm Justin Freeman. You can find me on Twitter at JustinFreeman18. We'll see you guys next week, and it'll be game week. See you, fellas.